A gun found on Tyrone Davis Jr.'s body, but never mentioned in the initial police report. Added weeks later, with no chain of custody. No one knows where it is now. Rena Demps, Tyrone's mother, telling investigators he had a history of jumping out of moving vehicles, directly contradicting what Lulu herself said under oath. Tyrone Sr.'s name allegedly missing from his son's birth certificate, a distraction, Chanae Jackson says, planted by someone trying to discredit the father's side of the family, and the black box that GPD promised to pull but never did. These are the new developments emerging from Chanae Jackson's latest update, and they raise more questions than answers. Before we break it all down, this is True Crime Unraveled. To everyone watching, commenting, and sharing, we see you. And to our super thanks gifters, you keep us going. Thank you. Now let's get into what Chanae revealed. Chanae began with a stunning omission from the GPD report. According to the documents, EMS found a gun on Dro's person at the scene, but that detail was not included in the original report. It was added on March 10th, just days before the family met with GPD on March 13th. The supervisor approved it on March 11th. There is no reason that it would actually make sense for this to be added. And then the family asked in the meeting about his guns, and they said they didn't think it was relevant. How is a firearm found on a deceased person not relevant? And where is that gun now? If EMS found it, there should be a chain of custody. Was it turned over to Lulu? To law enforcement? It can't go to Renee because she has felonies on her record. So where did it go? Chanae is clear. This is not about speculation. It's about accountability. And right now, that gun is unaccounted for. Someone has been spreading the claim that Big Tyrone is not on Dro's birth certificate. Chanae dismisses this as a deliberate distraction. Why is that relevant at all in this particular case when both sides are clear that Dro was Tyrone's son? She points out that Big Tyrone was on child support, which means paternity was legally established. In Florida, you can't get child support without establishing paternity first. Even if he weren't on the birth certificate, the courts would have recognized him as the legal father. Chanae infers that this information likely came from Rena Demps. There will be nobody else willing to have a conversation and state that Big Tyrone is not on a certificate. She also reminds viewers that Tyrone Jr. was raised by the Davis family, his paternal grandmother. If paternity wasn't established, why would he be living with them? The question remains, why is this being brought up now? Is it an attempt to discredit the father's side of the family and their fight for justice? During the investigation, Rena Demps told law enforcement that Tyrone had a history of jumping out of moving vehicles. But Chanae points out that Lulu herself, in her recorded interview, stated the opposite. She was clear that he has never jumped out of a vehicle because he was upset. That's what she stated on record. So who is telling the truth? If Rena is correct, then Lulu's statement is false. If Lulu is correct, then Rena is either mistaken or deliberately misleading investigators. Chanae suggests that Rena's comment may have influenced GPD's decision to close the case as an accident. But the evidence, the injuries, the timeline, the changing stories doesn't support that conclusion. Chanae is adamant. The case should never have been labeled accidental. There's no evidence to support an accident. The same way there's no evidence to support criminality, there's no evidence to support an accident. She argues that at minimum, the classification should be undetermined. But she goes further. She believes there are grounds for criminal negligence or even leaving the scene of an accident. By your statement, he jumped out of a moving car going 20 to 30 miles per hour. You are criminally negligent because you failed to stop. She gives an example. A friend of hers accidentally hit a neighbor's mailbox and didn't realize it. Law enforcement still tried to prosecute her for leaving the scene. If that's true for a mailbox, why not for a human being? So the question is, if Lulu saw or should have seen Tyrone exit the vehicle, why didn't she stop immediately? And if she didn't see him, why did she drive to Circle K and wait? Here's another contradiction. Chanae says there is a communication from GPD to the medical examiner's office stating that they were going to pull the black box to analyze driving patterns. But when the family met with GPD, they were told it wasn't pulled. There are people that reached out prior to the case closure and the detective told them that they did pull the black box, that they just didn't transcribe it. So which is it? Was it pulled and ignored? Or was it never pulled at all? And why would a detective make that claim if it weren't true? The black box could have answered critical questions. How fast was the car going? Did Lulu brake or accelerate? Was the door opened while the vehicle was in motion? Without that data, the investigation is incomplete. Chanae addressed reports that Lulu and Renee are hiring an attorney. Her response was unexpected. We actually hope so. Please, by all means, do it. If you got the attorney, please send me some documentation immediately. She explains that the family previously consulted a wrongful death attorney who said that if they proceeded, Lulu could simply not contest the case and it would go into default, meaning no answers would come out. But now, if Lulu and Renee are lawyering up, that could actually force the case into open court, where all the evidence could be presented. So rather than fearing legal representation for the other side, Chanae welcomes it, because that might be the only way to get a public adversarial proceeding. Chanae closed with statement. 2 people came to Gainesville and 1 didn't make it home. 2 people came. 1 left here in a body bag and the other one is walking around. Who knows what happened? The Davis family will continue to fight. They will pay for records, hire experts, and push for transparency. They are entitled to do so, regardless of what anyone on social media thinks. Now let's step back and compare what Chanae has revealed with what Polo has been saying. Polo has insisted that the phone data matches Lulu's story, that the police did their job, and that there's no evidence of foul play. But Chanae is pointing to investigative gaps that even a complete investigation would have needed to fill. The gun was found but not recorded until weeks later. Where is it? If the gun was on Tyrone's person, could it have played a role in the argument? Was it ever tested for fingerprints or DNA? We don't know. The black box promised, then apparently not pulled. Polo hasn't addressed this contradiction. If the black box data exists, why hasn't it been released? If it doesn't exist, why did a detective claim it was pulled? Rena's statement about Tyrone jumping out of cars before contradicts Lulu's sworn testimony. Who is the jury supposed to believe? And why would Rena say that unless she was trying to protect Lulu or minimize the incident? And the birth certificate distraction, why bring it up now? Is it an attempt to marginalize Tyrone Sr.'s role in seeking justice? Or is it simply a red herring to divert attention from the real issues? Finally, Chanae's legal argument about criminal negligence and leaving the scene is compelling. Even if Tyrone jumped voluntarily, Lulu's failure to stop and her decision to drive to a gas station and wait could constitute reckless disregard for his safety. Under Florida Statute 782.07, that could be manslaughter. But Polo would counter. The phone data shows she didn't stop at the scene, but it also shows she didn't linger. She went to Circle K, then returned when she saw emergency vehicles. Is that enough to prove criminal intent? Or is it just poor judgment? The problem is, without the black box, without the gun's chain of custody, without a full, unbiased investigation, we're left with competing narratives, not definitive answers. So here are the questions we should all be asking. If the gun was found on Tyrone, why wasn't it logged immediately? Where is it now? If the black box was pulled, why wasn't the data analyzed? If it wasn't pulled, why did GPD tell the medical examiner they would? Why did Rena tell police Tyrone had a history of jumping out of cars, directly contradicting Lulu's sworn statement? And why is Tyrone Sr.'s paternity even being discussed when it has no bearing on what happened under that bridge? The Davis family is not backing down. They've paid over $500 for records, hired a PI, and assembled a research team. They want a thorough investigation. They want the truth. The question is, will GPD ever admit its failures? Will the state attorney ever review this case with fresh eyes? Or will the accident ruling stand, leaving Dro's children without answers forever? This is True Crime Unraveled. Share this video. Keep demanding transparency. And drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. Justice for Dro.
Good afternoon and happy Monday. So I wanted to take a moment in order to check in and give some clarifications related to the Tyrone Davis Jr. case. kind of in response, the research team had done a YouTube video for people to be able to tune in and get information over Saturday. And I took notes of the things that were actually dropped in the actual comments. I've been sent information as it relates to clarity. Since last week, if you've noticed any statement that I've made regarding this case, I keep saying reading is comprehension. So the first thing I want to do is actually define what comprehension actually means before I actually give the actual case updates. And I don't want you to ever just take my word for it. So I'm going to come with information. So I want to read to you all the definition of comprehension, because this is so imperative at this time. So comprehension is the ability to understand the meaning, nature, and importance of something, often referring to grasping information, ideas, or concepts fully. It involves active cognitive processes such as reading, listening, or analyzing to construct meaning, typically encompassing both the understanding of facts and the ability to interpret them. Key aspects of comprehension are cognitive process. It is a complex process involving memory, attention, and prior knowledge. Active understanding in education, it refers to the ability to process text, understand its meaning, and integrate it with what the reader already knows. Inclusion, it can also mean the capacity to comprehend or include, derived from the Latin comprehende. So important things: understanding, discernment, grasp, inclusion, or appreciation are some of the synonyms of comprehension. So when we think about examples, reading or listening comprehension, she scored high on the reading comprehension test. So the understanding is the subject was beyond his comprehension. Conceptual grasp, she showed a deep comprehension for the issue. And inclusion or containment, the study has a wide comprehension of social issues. Effective comprehension often requires using strategies like visualizing information, summarizing, drawing inferences, and asking questions to connect ideas. And I wanted to make it a point in order to read that, because you all have heard me use things like one can infer and inferences and those particular things often when I've actually talked about this case. I think it's imperative in this moment when we talk about reading as comprehension, because there were some times in the beginning that we did not have understanding of quite a few things because public records were not available. Because law enforcement was not forthcoming with information. There were things that we've been able to infer and figure out, not just because of what law enforcement did gather or what they didn't gather, but also from other reports, like the one from fire rescue and like these information that we got from the ME's office. And I wanted to state, so one of the things that I want to talk to you about is confirmation bias before I give the actual clarifications to help you all. And one of the reasons I want you all to understand confirmation bias, because when we are stating, hey, y'all saying the same thing over and over, how could they not grasp that? Confirmation bias plays a role and is also one of the reasons that GPD did not do their part to adequately investigate this case. So confirmation bias is a common psychological tendency to search for, interpret, and recall information in a way that aligns with one's pre-existing beliefs or values. This bias acts as an internal yes man, causing individuals to favor evidence that supports their views while ignoring or downplaying contradictory data. Confirmation bias primarily affects 3 stages of information processing: biased search, actively seeking out sources or asking one-sided questions that are likely to yield a confirming answer; biased interpretation, reading the same ambiguous evidence as a supporter and seeing it as proof while an opponent sees it as flawed; and biased memory, selectively remembering hits times you were right and forgetting misses all the details that challenge your stance. This happens because psychologists suggest several reasons for this stubborn brain behavior. One is efficiency. It is a cognitive shortcut that helps us process the overwhelming amount of daily information quickly. 2 is self-esteem. Being wrong can be psychologically painful. Confirming our beliefs helps us to feel intelligent and secure. and cognitive dissonance. We naturally seek to avoid the mental discomfort of holding two conflicting ideas at once. And you've heard me state before, hello there, that two things can be true at one time in many, many cases and scenarios. So I wanted to make sure that you all understood these two things as I state to you some clarifications. So one, on Saturday's call, somebody actually in the chat commented that in the public records, there's a denotation that Tyrone Davis Jr. had a history of mental health issues that would state that he would jump out of a vehicle. That is absolutely 100% not true. And so, hey there, so that it's 100% not true. Like, not at all. And I want to state that because how could someone come up with that? They could come up with it because of confirmation bias and or lack of comprehension of the information that they're gathering. Another statement that was made was when I read the police reports. Well, oh my goodness, she only read the things that were favorable to Lulu. No, I read the report in its entirety. So if you've only grasped certain parts of it and didn't have the ability to comprehend by analyzing all of the information in front of you and reading it together, you don't understand pattern recognition. You can't draw inferences. So it's these particular things. And I want to help people with that. I want to help people with that because it is very clear that that was one of the reasons we just didn't release the documents, because so many people lack actual comprehension. So things that stood out to those of us who can comprehend, who can also draw inferences. Tyrone was in the hospital fighting for his life before being pronounced dead. Lulu, in the middle of the night, it was like 11 o'clock at night, reached out to the investigator on the case to ask them to read her the witness statements so that she could have something to give to the family. Why would she need that when she's the person that's present? You just tell the family what the fuck happened. Part of the issue with that is that when you actually read just the stuff we have, and we don't even have it all yet, her story changed at the scene. And one can infer that her story changed at the scene because his injuries did not match stepping out of a car and nothing happening at all. So then her inference from what she could see is that it was not well received was to state, well, oh, the car was moving, or it was this, in order to give a correlation for his injuries and what happened with him getting out of the car. So when you comprehend, you are aware of these things. So it's very clear. That's why I keep saying reading is comprehension, that people can't comprehend these things. If people comprehend it, literally from what law enforcement wrote from the download of her phone, that she texted his mom and said he slipped and fell and busted his head. How would she know that if he stepped out of the vehicle and she did not look back and kept going? There's not a way for her to know that. And that's also a different explanation of what happened. So again, reading would be comprehension if you took the time to understand that particular thing. So I hope this helps. I'm going to keep going a bit further from other things that were actually brought up. And I made sure to take notes so that I did not lose any. So now there's new information that says that Big Tyrone is not on T2's birth certificate. So if reading is comprehension, a few things. Number one, why is that relevant at all in this particular case when both sides are clear that T2 was Tyrone's son? But again, let's keep going further. Big Tyrone was on child support, which means that paternity was absolutely established. In order for you to be on child support, paternity has to be established first. That is literally how it goes in the state of Florida. And the state of Florida is so very attuned to this that there are cases, not in this case, and let me say that clearly because comprehension is very lax for a lot of people, where people have signed a birth certificate or established paternity in court and gone back and done a DNA test and then found out that a child was not theirs. And in the state of Florida, you can't do what's called bastardize a child. So they are still legally responsible for that child. They are the next of kin. I want to state, I'm not even sure why this is coming up and relevant because it's already been established that Big Tyrone is the next of kin, just like the mom is the next of kin. What is becoming clear as we comprehend and inference that a lot of the disconnection has come from Renee. And Chanae said that. Because in order for that to even be an issue, that would have had to have come from Renee. And we can infer that because there will be nobody else willing to have a conversation and state that Big Tyrone is not on a birth certificate and not wait for anybody else to know that and state from Renee. But I'm inclined to believe that if you go get a birth certificate now, that paternity has been established. Mind you, being a mom who was clear about establishing paternity, so making sure that all of them and paternity is established for all of my children, I navigate this because I actually enforce all of my own child support cases. So I'm going to keep going. There were other things that were brought up that Lulu and Renee are hiring an attorney. We actually hope so. So the purpose of the wrongful death attorney would have been to get this case in court and then be able to present all of the information because GPD didn't send it to the state attorney where they should have while we were waiting for this case to close. So literally by them going to court, all of the information and the documentation that we have, everything that the private investigators actually presented, that is of benefit to this family. That's also of benefit to me, being the activist helping work this case. So please, by all means, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying double down and do it. I'm saying do it right now. I'm saying if you got the attorney, please send me some documentation immediately. And so I want to make sure that that is actually on record. We're not shying away from that. We want that. What happened when we talked to the wrongful death attorney is that they stated that if the family proceeded with that, they would be paying astronomical amounts of money in order to gather the information that we're gathering. And then Lulu still could actually state, well, I'm not going to argue the case, and it would just go into a default. That means they wouldn't be able to put anything on record. So as this is being presented as a negative thing, that would be absolutely helpful. So as you all go back and report these things, please let them know that is exactly what we want to happen. And we are very clear because we're not speaking on this to demean anybody. This is where the evidence has led us. This is what we see as it relates to the facts of the actual case and the behavior that does not make sense. And yes, I have seen how people have recycled videos in order to help people understand what their own position was and how it just flipped the script. So I want to be very, very clear about those particular things. Other things, as we talk about reading as a comprehension, and I want to give a clarification as it related to this gun. So one thing that was pointed out to me this morning, which I read, and I read it on report, that they stated that EMS found a gun on Tyrone's person. What was strange to us before getting these documents is I sat with the family with a lieutenant and a captain as the family asked about his guns again, and everybody was looking like a deer in headlights. What is interesting about this report is the reference of the gun wasn't written into the report until March the 10th. They claimed they closed the case on March the 12th. And then we went and met with them on March the 13th. And because it had just been added to the report on the 10th, and then the supervisor approved it on the 11th, it means the lieutenant and the captain had not seen that that was added there. There is no reason that it would actually make sense for this to be added. And then the family asked in the meeting about his guns, and they said they didn't think it was relevant. How did you not think it was relevant, but then you added it to a report a few days before it's time to meet with the family? But what's also interesting is the chain of custody. So if EMS found the gun on Tyrone's person, why is it not denoted anywhere what happened to the gun? So if it was on his person, where is it now? Does law enforcement have it? Was it turned over to Lulu? It can't go to Renee because she has felonies on her record. So where is the gun? And so these are the things when we state that reading is comprehension and people want to jump and be the first people or maybe the people that disseminate information, it is imperative for you to understand, and you have a responsibility to disseminate it responsibly. And that's not what's happening because everybody wants views or wants to be the person when literally there is a method to all of this that is going off rails because people don't know what they're actually doing. So these are the things that must be followed up on. Another deal is somebody stated that between the two medical examiner reports that he had two different drugs in his system outside of the ketamine. So to be helpful, In one report, it states that from the ME, it says he has benzos in his system. And in other one, it actually names the midazolam or whatever the name of it is. That drug is a benzo. That drug is a benzo. The benzo or benzodiazepine is the classification of the drug. So there's not two different medications outside of the ketamine in his system as it relates to that on the ME's report. They're the same drug. One is the name of the drug that fire and rescue denoted. The other by the ME is the classification of the drug. And so I wanted to make sure to give this. I want to be clear that in the medical records that the research team is actually going through and going to be able to analyze and disaggregate that they did a drug panel when he first got there. Everything is below detectable limits except for a little bit of alcohol or not like at all, which means so below detectable limits means they're not in his system. So he had a totally clear drug panel outside of the medication management. What is interesting though is I actually put up a part of the screenshot of the medical records that shows what medications were given as a part of his medical management and his medical treatment. But because of confirmation bias, people are skipping out over that information. We've also shared that even with ketamine, it only stays in the blood for 24 hours. And the reason that it was still in his system by the time he got to the medical examiner is because it was a part of his medical management. But because of confirmation bias, people are ignoring the actual fact about how. Another thing they talked about, well, on the medical examiner's report, they stated that they did one that was called antemortem, which is before death, and one that is postmortem when it comes to these classifications. They did as a baseline. But if we go all the way back to what we stated, whether you did an antemortem or postmortem, the ketamine would have already been dissolved from his actual system because medications have what's called like a half-life and those particular things. It would have already metabolized out. It did not because it was part of his medication management. We have stated this multiple times and gone around in circles, but the reason it has been disregarded is because of biased confirmation. The actual facts that we are finding out don't fit any of the ways that they've said that this has actually transpired. Even when it comes to the actual medical records, when they came to the actual diagram, when you talk about a contusion is just a bruise that happened because his brain hit the front of his head. This has been explained, but because that does not actually fit what people have decided in their minds took place, they're totally regarding facts. Facts are indisputable. Facts are objective. That's not about how anybody feels. That's what's presented. So that's the reason I want to give a clarification. Other things. Somebody stated that police lie. I'm one of the first people to tell you that. But what I also want to be clear about is how it works, especially in rules of criminal procedure. We have to accept what's on the minimus until we get in contradicting information. We know that they did 7 supplements to the same report. We got that. 4 of the supplements are the same. There are minor things like name changes and different things like that. So the fact that somebody says, well, you only read because the basic supplements were in favor with her until they started to get evidence, and the evidence doesn't support what she stated. If you're reading the same police report that states that the medical examiner states that there were questions, you're reading the same police reports where the family said that the doctor said that these injuries don't match what happened. How is it? Well, you're only reading the things that are not favorable to her. This is what happened. And when you see them all in their totality, that's the clarification as it relates to all of that. But even outside of that, because we are in agreement, because I see the bullshit that they write. I've actually laid this out. When I read what they stated, they got extrapolated from the statements of Lulu's interview. Her interview was almost 5 hours long. So what they got was only about 8 pages. So we know that there's significantly more. That is the reason that we are waiting on this additional information. That is the reason that I paid the $561 in order to get these things. And so therefore, when we get this, we will get a clearer picture. I want to name this because when I first entered the chat, I was very clear. We're going to present things in a responsible manner as we get it. And if we get things that are contradictory, we will come back and be able to explain those things. One thing that they keep bringing up in the beginning is that Auntie Tasha has speculation that maybe he was hit with a Hennessy bottle. That was a speculation because no one knew what was going on. Once we got the evidence, we understand that it wasn't a Hennessy bottle at the cabins. We've stated this multiple times. And so for people to go all the way back, once it was made clear that whatever happened after he left Papa John's, and people were still going back to Gilchrist County, that's biased confirmation because you're trying to make puzzle pieces fit that do not fit. And so I want to keep going. So, and again, if we get her statement and it aligns, we will state that. Things that stood out to me is in the statement, they stated she was clear that he has never jumped out of a vehicle because he was upset. That's what she stated on record in the recorded interview. That's what they wrote down. So when I go and see that his mom turned around and said that he's known for jumping out of vehicles when he gets upset, that does not make sense. When we're looking at facts that state that his mom said don't give his stuff to his family, that does not make sense. Number one, because I was under the impression that you were there. And number two, if this relates to your son, and she was the last person to see your son alive and something happened to him, why would you not want her to turn herself over to the other side of his family that up until this time you had a great relationship with, which is the facts. Law enforcement stated that's what you said, and that's exactly what the family said. That's the actual fact. That's not even an opinion. Those are two things that actually align. Well, all of you stated that you had this great relationship until you flipped the script. Other things that, leaving the scene. So then when we keep talking about the case is closed, we know that. But the deal is cases are reopened all the time. Cases are closed as accidental and reopened all the time. Our deal was, and the family's been clear, and I have too, their number one was not a thorough investigation. And number two, you can't close this case with accidental because there's no evidence to support an accident. There's no evidence to support, the same way there's no evidence to support in your mind's criminality, there's no evidence to support an accident. Two things that support criminality when you're looking at it from a legal standpoint. Number one, criminal negligence is one. If it's the statute, if it's the elements, you're the last person in the vehicle with somebody. If you left them on the side of the road by your statement because cars were coming, you can be criminally liable for that, even if there was no intention. And by your statement, he jumped out of a moving car going 20 to 30 miles per hour, depending on which statement you want to give. You are criminally negligent because you were forced to stop. When you go look, also leaving the scene, when you, even if you're not charged with criminal negligence, you left the scene of what's considered an accident. And it's considered an accident by your statement because he jumped, so you said, out of a moving car. So let me be very clear. I have a friend that literally hit a neighbor's mailbox that's near her yard. She didn't even know she hit the neighbor's mailbox. Law enforcement was called because she was just going to call her insurance company the next day. And because she thought it was just her vehicle, her tree. When she found out the next day it was a neighbor's mailbox, it was like $100 or something mailbox. They paid it. Her and her neighbor went on the way. They tried to prosecute her for leaving the scene for hitting a mailbox that she did not know that she hit in the dark, trying to avoid hitting a goddamn deer. So you can't tell me that they don't believe that they can prosecute her for leaving a scene where he supposedly jumped out of a moving vehicle. So when we talk about whether there's criminality or not, it would either be undetermined or it would be leaving the scene or criminal negligence, not an accident. I wanted to make sure and be crystal clear as we clarify the things that are actually happening. I want to be crystal clear. The reason now that we're seeing the police report of particular things is because I was putting up the public records requests for people to learn, and people were taking those public records requests, copy and pasting them to get the same documents, but they don't have the same level of comprehension. They don't have the same level of experience. They don't know how to draw actual inferences that actually make sense. There's a science that's actually to this. And so you need to have a cognitive ability to be able to process this information in a very responsible way. And I want to state this because literally when you're giving arguments on either side, when that's why there's an arrest phase, and then that's when the state attorney decides if they're going to file charges, and there's a prosecutorial phase. And so what happens is you have to make meaning of the evidence that you have in front of you. What has happened in the age of social media, too many people are getting access to evidence and they don't have the ability to make meaning of the evidence that's in front of them. And that is part of the challenge. That's why I told you a lot of the misinformation is purposeful, because it is reckless and irresponsible to be able to share anything that you should not be sharing if you're not responsible enough to understand what you're sharing. That's literally what it is. Yes, we are watching. No, because I stated to you all very, very clear. I've stated to you all very, very clear that as it relates to everything that's happening and taking place, we are going to proceed forward. We are going to follow this all the way through. We are waiting for additional records. People are upset now because some of the things that they can't get access to without being a family member. When I started this, is one of the reasons I said that I create and compile the records requests, and then I have them to be sent on the behalf of the family. Even the $561 that was paid, the reason I paid it is because I'm following back up. I'm on behalf of the family. Why would you be charging them for records in the case of their loved one because you did not appropriately investigate this particular case, because you did not do your actual part? And that's literally where we are. And again, part of that was bias confirmation. Each time that the medical examiner reached out, what they said is, well, the mom said there's no reason for us to look into it, but the evidence doesn't support that. Each time the medical examiner, well, is there a video? Because the injuries don't match. Well, we just think that's what it is because she said it. When we sat with law enforcement, they specified the reason, the only evidence that they have is this person's statement. And they said, well, oh, she didn't ask for an attorney. Her statement was consistent. The statement is not consistent. If you're able to read and comprehend, you can see very clearly that the statement is not consistent. This is not us making it up. This is not us coming for her. And that's the reason that we welcome going to actual court. Not a lie has been told on her. What is interesting is that the arrest reports validate and verify the things that have been said, and yet we're still here. And I will continue to move forward in order to be able to disseminate factual information. If you so choose to take the factual information and process it and utilize it, cool. If you don't, that's on you, and that speaks to you as well. Like I stated, some of these, even when it relates to whether the dad's on the birth certificate, is not relevant at all. We're only addressing it because it's a distraction. It's an absolute distraction. Like, even if he wasn't, it does not take away from the love or the genuine relationship that both sides of the family took place. How is this even a conversation when we know that this child lived with his paternal grandmother? So are you stating that you went and let your son live with some people and there's no paternity established, or that you was unaware? That makes no sense. But literally, it's a distraction for people who are easily distracted, or, oh my gosh, related to squirrel. It has nothing to do with the issue at hand. Number one, because it's already been established. And number two, literally all they're asking for is a thorough investigation and to look into what happened. The fact that people are stating that this is unreasonable, the fact that, oh, they need to leave it alone, and you can have your opinion. It's not your family. You're not the person that lost it. They're entitled to do whatever they see that is fit. So the way that they're paying for a PI, and the way that they're also paying for records, and the way that they're utilizing time, effort, and energy, that's what they so choose to do. And even as we relate to the legal system, they're entitled to do it. So that is the reason that things like public records requests and things like those exist, for transparency, for clarity, to look. And then my final point is, as it relates to even some of the things that, they did not get, or like when they went to Country Inn and Suites. Because they did not do that immediately, by the time they went back, there was the vehicle was no longer there. So it's just a recording. Well, the issues with that is, if they followed the appropriate protocol, not only were they supposed to give a preservation notice, in that notice it states what's called spoliation. And what spoliation means, that you don't have to have any malicious intent to destroy something. If you've destroyed something or gotten rid of something that was utilized in a particular investigation, then by default, so what that means is, if GPD didn't do their part, that the jury instructions for the court would be to assume that is something that would have helped Lulu. That is the law. So many people are experts and know nothing about Florida statutes, the actual law, rules of criminal procedure, rules of civil procedure. It's so ironic how so many people are experts and don't know a goddamn thing. I hope this helps. I do. If it doesn't, that's on you. Our deal is to be deliberate as possible about ensuring that we're clarifying what is actually happening, what is actually so, and what is actually not so we can sift through all of the BS. I want to be clear, and the family's been clear. It don't matter what y'all got going on across this social media platform, they're going to see this process all the way through, and they're entitled to do so. I challenge so many people, number one, if you have nothing beneficial to add, to find you something else to do. And number two, to check yourself if you're working so hard to ensure or to work against or speak against this family finding out what happened to their loved one. At the end of the day, the thing that we all are aware of is 2 people came to Gainesville and 1 didn't make it home. Period. 2 people came and 1 left here in a body bag, and the other one is walking around who knows what happened. And her story has changed multiple times. So had that person been up front in the first place, we would not be here. Had that person been honest in the first place, we would not be here. And the way we know that she's not been honest, because they've lied and said that lie detector test was done and she took 3 and she passed all of them. That did not happen. That did not happen. So if they want to put it to rest and then she takes a lie detector, cool. I don't think that the family would be opposed to that. But it did not take place. For them to state that the black box was pulled, it was supposed to have been pulled. There's literally a communication from GPD that is sent to the medical examiner's office stating that they were going to pull the black box to see the driving patterns, which makes sense in this case. And from what they told us, it didn't happen. There are people that reached out prior to case closure and stated the detective told them that they did pull the black box, that they just didn't transcribe it. So we're still now waiting to get everything to see which is true, because we don't know. Why did the detective state that they were going to do it and didn't? I don't know. Why? If they did pull it, they lied and said they didn't. I don't know. I'm going by the facts and the things that we're trying to get the answers to these questions from. So I do hope that this helps. Y'all enjoy the rest of your week.